Supergirl, the follow-up to last year's Superman, the second film in the new James Gunn-led DCU Paramount merger pending. It's out, it's here, and it's not going very well at all, actually, with the potential to lose hundreds of millions. Undeniably a touch frisky for an early film in a long-running franchise, and manifesting a 54% Rotten Tomato critic score hasn't been helping either. I'll be the first person to tell you that that site isn't worth the time it takes to type the URL, but it is an indicator. And in this case, it's an indicator of some of the most vicious reviews and sentiment I've seen in a good while. Supergirl is being labelled as extremely subpar, as random, ugly, and lifeless. I've seen it called cliché and nothing more than filler, a term that used to just mean an anime original episode to give a manga some breathing room, twisted into meaning not worth your time. Reviews for Supergirl are incessantly comparative, never-ending mentions of attempts to imitate Gunn's style and Guardians of the Galaxy, or the dusty, grungy western dystopia of Mad Max. One review made out that the whole film was a poor attempt to emulate the Mos Eisley cantina scene from A New Hope. It's almost fascinating how so many of them cling to the same references to be used as an insult with which to dock points, rather than use critical engagement towards the film's various aspects. Many of these examples were taken verbatim, and the ones that weren't are paraphrased from multiple different reviews. I also have a number of direct quotes that go to show the energy being directed at Supergirl, but I'll keep it to just one. After doing his best to make the events in Supergirl seem vapid and motivationless, asserting that there was, and I quote, no story, Owen Gleiberman, for Variety, said, quote, "Kill Krem, save the dog. Those are the motivations driving the entire, not even interesting enough to be convoluted plot of Supergirl. Maybe that's why the movie is full of action, yet numbingly flat." End quote. That's not even close to the worst thing that he said. I just got really tilted by the 6 straight hyphens. This is a summary of the loudest voices in the critical reception. I'm sure you've seen a good chunk of the internet's response to the film as well, especially the subsect that made their mind up when the first trailer released and has done nothing but hurl abuse and attempts at sexualization towards Millie Alcock. A long list of Reddit threads, the IMDb review bombing, it's a story we've all seen before. One of a segregated online echo chamber that thinks if they bitch loud enough they can still #restore the Snyderverse. The difficult part about this discussion is that most of the base critique is completely fair, accurate even. Supergirl is at best good fun and at worst messy and lackluster, really depends where you sit on about 7 different fences. The script is not great, being Anna Nogira's first major writing credit, and unfortunately that does translate into not getting the most out of your characters. It is edited for pace over everything else, giving the film a certain breathlessness. It is lit weirdly, which shows up more on darker, lower quality projections. The action is a little messy. Lobo straight up doesn't even need to be there. Eve Ridley as Ruthie takes half the film to warm up, and even then she's struggling against the script and being 15, but she can't really help that one. The sex trafficking subplot is nothing more than surface level, and Krem of the Yellow Hills is a shallow villain, even if I think his actor is eating every scene he's in. So yes, almost every point of criticism you've seen is somewhere in the film to some degree. I will just interject myself quickly here to say that as an adaptation on the source material, it does seem to be a little worse for wear, and I've seen it commonly recommended that if you do want to read Woman of Tomorrow, to do so after seeing the film. Then again, when are people ever happy with an adaptation? I don't disagree with the points of criticism. In fact, I will typically defend critics when the audience and critical reception to a film is completely different, because critics aren't looking for the same thing that your average cinema goer is. An audience wants entertainment, a critic wants quality, were we to boil it down as far as we could. And it's mostly a vocal minority who are coming at Supergirl with such hostility. Plenty of the critique is decently level-headed before it gets completely buried, but nonetheless, what I am taking issue with is the language being used. It comes across as a refusal to acknowledge any of Supergirl's strengths, bar the strong casting of Millie Alcock, which seems to be the one thing most people can agree on. There's more to give credit to than I feel most of these reactions are willing to do, such as the strong costume and makeup work that is getting sparsely mentioned. It's a similar story with the sets and environments, at least the less CG ones. While the action may be messy, there are also some fun set pieces, and I for one had no particular issue with readability in the action scenes. The film's colouring is genuinely quite vibrant. It gets buried with decent frequency, but when it's there, it stands out. There's a lot of fun world-building touches that go beyond just Metropolis, and a strong set of flashbacks for Kara's backstory. Those, admittedly, are actually getting mentions, but I still wanted to talk about them. Crypto continues to be a very good boy. Again, that one's more of a personal mention. Alcock somehow produces chemistry with every character on set, which only makes her comfortability with Corin Sweat's Superman stand out even more. The script may be weak overall, but it has its moments. It would be disingenuous to claim it does nothing but stink the entire way through. It would get you clicks though. You can criticize something, a film, TV, a game, music, anything, without being openly hostile towards the piece and actively dismissive of its positive qualities, leaving nothing but a scathing, brochure-length SEO post that will do a great job at convincing people that the piece isn't worth engaging with. I've been doing it literally as we speak. I'm getting a little feisty here and there, sure, but I'm also not reviewing a piece of mass media for one of the biggest outlets out there. In my short but sweet Letterboxd review, which I guess I'll plug in the description, I said, quote, "It reminds me of why I stopped wanting to review films. It always seems like they don't want to enjoy anything anymore. They find the cracks and never stop going for them." End quote. To critique is in the job description, but a lot of this goes past critique. The worst kept secret on the internet is that having an extreme opinion, especially a negative one, will attract more views, clicks, and interaction. In the case of digital media, they've become reliant on ad revenue, which they get from clicks. There is a financial incentive in a world that the media still struggles to navigate to be actively inflammatory in whatever direction that may be. I'm not saying the entire opinion of these reviews is constructed for SEO. I would sincerely hope things haven't gotten that depraved and that they have more self-respect than that. But it would be silly to pretend it doesn't have an impact. It certainly has on the internet as a whole, voicing your opinion in more and more extreme terms until you find the people that agree with you. Even on YouTube, it is a statistical fact that a negative-leaning title will be more likely to succeed. This is why I think Supergirl's biggest problem is the internet. In another time, it would be seen as a perfectly serviceable movie with some fun action, interesting characters, and the promise that we would see more and likely better from them in the future. It has a decent heart, and there was a point where that was good enough for a lot of people. I think in some ways it still is. Admittedly, context is key. We also live in a time where bad superhero movies have become a little too common, the so-called superhero fatigue, and the internet does a fantastic job of turning everything into a culture war. It's a coming-of-age film with a woman in the lead, not a hardcore feminist manifesto. We are allowed to chill out a bit. It's hard to know how many variables have gone into Supergirl's box office woes. How much did the bad word of mouth affect ticket sales? Was it marketed in the wrong places? Do women just not care about this stuff? I know for a fact that one's total garbage, but I will still posit the point. Or maybe there is still that lingering sense that pop culture is a boys' club. Some women may have slipped past the wrought iron gates, but we've still done quite a good job at keeping them out since time immemorial, am I right, lads? But guys, fellas, men, have we considered that the film may be just fine to us, but means so much more to others? My audience is mostly American men, so I'm going to say no and carry on regardless. There has always been a Superman. Almost, it's pretty close. From the days of Kirk Allen and George Reeves in the 40s and 50s, less than 20 years after the character's inception in 1938, to Christopher Reeve, making you believe a man could fly from 78 to 87. Dean Cain came shortly after as Lois and Clark ran from 93 to 97, before Smallville's 10-year run with Tom Welling from 2001 to 2011. If you don't want to count TV, don't you worry, we also had Brandon Routh in Superman Returns circa 2006, the weird pseudo-sequel thing to Superman 2. Henry Cavill bursts shirtlessly onto the scene in Man of Steel 2013. That's right, it's been 13 years and we're all crumbling to dust. Where you want to consider the end of Cavill's run is dependent on how you view things like Zack Snyder's Justice League and his end credits scene in Black Adam. Either way, it's somewhere between 2017 and 2023. For a while there, we even had two of them, as Tyler Hoechlin showed up through the various CW shows before Superman and Lois from 2016 to 2024. But all roads lead to David Corenswet, who has been playing the character since last year. The biggest break is the gap from George Reeves to Christopher Reeve. After that, there was never more than a few years without a major live-action Superman. Smallville was a very different beast, but it was big in its own way. Supergirl, on the other hand, has had 5 live-action adaptations, and one of them was Laura Vandervoort, who played Kara in a few seasons of Smallville. The others being Helen Slater, who played the character in 1984, Sasha Calle, who had a moderately sized role in 2023's The Flash, and Melissa Benoist, who played the CW version of the character from 2015 to 2021, all coming before Millie Alcock's turn at the character this year. There has been a Superman for every era, a version of the character for people to grow up with and appreciate. Sure, some of them were better than others, some were aimed at completely different audiences, and some would have worked for you personally, while others didn't. But they were always there. And that's without acknowledging the character's strong presence in animation through the years. I know you can't see my script right now, but the Superman paragraph was about 3 times longer than the Supergirl one. The conversation around the presence and quality of female leads has become unnecessarily difficult, but it is an undeniable fact that men get more representation than women, and quite literally always have. By turning the focus squarely on how Supergirl compares to its male lead counterparts, contemporaries, and inspirations, the ability to view the piece and the character on simply its own merits has been diluted. I received a message from a friend of mine who is a woman after the film, saying that she had never felt so represented by a hero, that her choices growing up were Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow, and Jessica Alba's Invisible Woman. Harley Quinn, especially when portrayed by Margot Robbie, could have been a powerful character, but by the time they started to get any sort of stride going, the damage had already been done. Black Widow was extremely hit or miss, depending on who had the pen, if Joss Whedon was anywhere in the remote vicinity, and even just which scene you're talking about. And Jessica Alba's Invisible Woman was Jessica Alba's Invisible Woman. That was, at one point, the best you could get. But here comes Millie Alcock as Kara Zor-El, Supergirl. She's got a blank slate because the most prominent version of this character is gender-bent Clark. She comes in straight off of a raging bender, her hair is a mess, and someone turned the sun up way too bright so sunglasses are permanently glued to her face. She can't train a dog to save her life, she's cocky and witty, knows her strength and how to use it, but she isn't like her cousin. She doesn't have that inbuilt need to help everyone because she's seen how powerless life can make you, but that doesn't mean she does nothing when a little girl gets done wrong. Because despite how lost she is, how angry at the universe she is, how hopelessly she views herself, she is still good. She's tough, not always kind, but good. It's called nuance. If you scroll down past the AI overview, there are also women who don't like Supergirl, who think that brash action and explosions only appeal to men and that it sets a bad standard for young girls. They exist too. Supergirl doesn't appeal to every woman, just as Superman doesn't appeal to every boy. Does that mean we shouldn't make them? This video is less about Supergirl and more about how criticism has changed. Captain Marvel released in 2019 and has a 79% Rotten Tomatoes critic score. I know I said ignore Rotten Tomatoes, stick with me. It came between Infinity War and Endgame, 2 of the biggest blockbusters in history when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was at its peak. Captain Marvel is these days considered to be one of the weaker MCU films. Releasing when it did and acknowledging the kinds of scores Marvel movies tended to walk away with almost no matter their quality, we can attribute a sort of buff to the reception of Captain Marvel. Now, superhero fatigue is thrown around like a disease. There has been a sharp rise in right-wing and anti-woke media, and a bigger spotlight is being placed on female-led action films. A debuff. There is no world where you could convince me that Supergirl and Captain Marvel are so far apart in quality. I personally would argue that Supergirl is the stronger picture, being focused on stronger characters and with more intentionality to its filmmaking, but Captain Marvel was easier entertainment. At the end of the day, reviews are just opinions, whether it be from professional critics or influencers or just armchair pundits like myself. You should never stop at one and never let it determine your own. They are just indicators. But there has been a more aggressive trend in recent years, and it's a trend I don't like. Examples like Supergirl are becoming more common. Why come up with your own nuanced opinion about something when you can just dogpile on the most viral reaction? Not that that's anything new, but it's something you used to expect from kids who haven't developed critical thinking yet. Now it's the mass media. Instead of informing the public on an opinion, they do their best to convince them that a piece of media, of art, isn't worth their time, encouraging people to miss out on a fun little space romp about a woman trying to save her dog and being super in the process. Thank you for watching the video. This is a bit different from the regular stuff, but it felt right. I don't know if there'll be more stuff like this in the future. We shall see. If you want the more straightforward game reviews and stuff, head over to the second channel, link in the description, and I will see you in the next video.